Some people enter our lives with flowers, kindness, and beautiful words. Others arrive by stealing our patience, testing our limits, and turning everything upside down before the first coffee is even finished. And maybe that is what makes certain beginnings so dangerous, when everything seems to go wrong and yet you still want to see where it will lead. The suitcase wheels hit every crack in the wooden porch steps, and Evelyn Reynolds dragged it up with the determination of someone who had not taken a vacation in 3 years, 31 years old, and she could not remember the last movie she had watched, the last book she had read that was not case law, the last Saturday morning she had spent doing absolutely nothing. But that was over now. 2 weeks, no court dates, no briefs. No paralegals calling at 6 in the morning about missing exhibits, just the ocean, a stack of novels she had been promising herself since law school, and silence. She pulled the house key from her purse, the one the owner's daughter had mailed to her, and fit it into the lock. The door swung open to the smell of salt air and something else, chocolate. There was a man on the sofa. He sat there like the furniture had been built around him. Tall, broad-shouldered, barefoot, wearing grey sweatpants and nothing else. His skin was tan, his hair dark and slightly damp, and he was eating a chocolate bar with the calm of someone watching Sunday morning television. He looked up at her. Then he looked at her suitcase, then back at her. He raised the chocolate bar like a toast. "Wrong house," he said. Evelyn blinked, twice. The air conditioning hummed. A ceiling fan turned slowly above his head. "Excuse me?" "You have the wrong house." He bit off another piece. "This one is taken." She dropped the suitcase handle. It clattered against the tile. She pulled her phone from her purse, opened the rental confirmation, and turned the screen toward him. "This house, this address, this week through the end of the month, signed and paid." He stopped chewing. She watched his jaw tighten. He set the chocolate bar on the coffee table, right on the glass, no coaster, no napkin, and pulled his own phone from between the sofa cushions. He held up the screen. "If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. A different contract, same house, same dates." "The owner reserved it for me," he said. "He does every summer. Has for 6 years. Well, the owner's daughter rented it to me." They stared at each other. The ocean crashed somewhere behind the house, completely unbothered. Evelyn called the daughter. Her name was Sophie, and she answered on the second ring with a voice already full of guilt. The explanation came fast, tripping over itself. Her father had forgotten to tell her about the standing reservation. She had listed the house, taken the booking, collected the payment. 2 valid contracts. 1 house. "I am so sorry," Sophie said, and she sounded close to tears. "I can refund you in full today, but I don't have another property in the same area, not at this level. Everything else is booked." Evelyn pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. 3 years without a vacation, and the universe was sending her a roommate. "Who is he?" "Owen Bennett. My father has known him personally for years. He's completely trustworthy. Dad treats him almost like family." Evelyn glanced at Owen. He was leaning back on the sofa, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that sat somewhere between amusement and mild inconvenience. His shoulders were wide enough to fill the frame of the hallway behind him. She looked away. "I'll call you back," she said, and hung up. Owen tilted his head. "So?" "So the owner forgot to tell his daughter you existed. She rented me the house without knowing." "That tracks. Gerald forgets where he puts his reading glasses every morning." He paused. "So you could find a hotel." "You could find a hotel. I was here first. I have a contract. So do I." The ceiling fan kept turning. Neither of them moved. Outside, the waves rolled in and pulled back, over and over, patient and indifferent. Owen looked at the porch through the open door behind her. The view was ridiculous. Deep blue water stretching to the edge of the sky, white sand catching the late afternoon light, a breeze that smelled like salt and warm wood. The kind of view that made people say things like, "I could live here." He was not giving it up. Evelyn looked at the same view. She had spent $400 on new sandals for this trip. She had packed 7 novels, a journal, and a bathing suit she had tried on 3 times before deciding it was appropriate enough. She was not giving it up either. 2 bedrooms, she asked. 2 bedrooms. You stay on your side, I stay on mine. He shrugged. Fine by me. Fine. He picked up his chocolate bar again. Welcome home, roommate. She did not smile. She refused to smile. But something at the corner of her mouth twitched, and she turned before he could see it, grabbing her suitcase and rolling it down the hall with purpose. Owen watched her go. Her hair swung behind her in a loose knot, and she walked like someone who had never lost an argument in her life. He bit into the chocolate and grinned. This was going to be fun. The master bedroom had a bathtub that could fit 2 grown adults and a view of the ocean through a frosted window. Owen knew this because he had used it every summer for 6 years. He knew exactly how long the hot water lasted, which angle let the evening light in, and how the porcelain held warmth long after the water drained. Now Evelyn Reynolds was standing in the doorway of that room with her suitcase, one hand on the frame, staking her claim like a flag planted in conquered soil. This one is mine, she said. On what grounds? I got here second, which means I had less time to choose. Fairness dictates I get first pick to compensate. He stared at her. That is the most creative piece of legal fiction I have ever heard. I'm a lawyer. Creative legal fiction is what I do. He leaned against the opposite wall and studied her. She had changed out of her travel clothes and was now wearing a cotton shirt knotted at the waist and linen shorts. Her collarbones caught the light from the hallway, sharp and precise like the rest of her. She smelled like something clean, lemon, maybe, or soap that cost more than his lunch. He could have argued. He had 6 years of precedent, personal history with the owner, and the physical advantage of simply standing in the doorway and not moving. But something in the way she gripped that suitcase handle, white-knuckled, exhausted, eyes that looked like they had not rested in months, made him step aside. All yours, counselor. She blinked, clearly prepared for a fight that was not coming. Just like that? Just like that. He pushed off the wall and headed toward the second bedroom. But I want visitation rights to the bathtub. Absolutely not. He smiled to himself and closed his door. The next morning, Evelyn woke at 6:15. She made the bed with hospital corners, arranged her toiletries on the bathroom shelf in order of use, and walked into the kitchen to find chaos. A half-eaten chocolate bar sat unwrapped on the counter. A damp towel hung over the back of a dining chair. His flip-flops were in the middle of the hallway, tossed there as if his feet had simply abandoned them. A coffee mug sat on the counter with no coaster beneath it, a faint brown ring already forming on the white surface. She stood in the kitchen doorway and counted to 10. She made it to 4. Owen. He appeared from the porch, coffee in hand, hair messy from sleep. Morning. There is a towel on the chair. He glanced at it. Yep. And chocolate on the counter. That's breakfast. Chocolate is not breakfast. It has cocoa, milk, and sugar. That covers at least 2 food groups. She picked up the towel with 2 fingers, folded it, and hung it on the hook by the bathroom door. She slid the chocolate bar onto a plate and pushed it to the edge of the counter. She moved his flip-flops to the shoe rack by the front door. He watched all of this from the porch, sipping his coffee, saying nothing, but his eyes followed her the way someone watches a fascinating nature documentary, curious, entertained, and a little bit in awe. By the second day, she had established a system. Dishes washed immediately after use, surfaces wiped down before bed, shoes by the door, towels on hooks. She printed nothing because there was no printer, but she did write a short list of house rules on a notepad she had brought in her suitcase and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet. Owen read it while eating another chocolate bar. Rule 4, he read aloud. All personal items must be stored in designated personal spaces. No exceptions. He looked at her across the kitchen island. You brought a notepad on vacation. I brought several. Of course you did. She poured herself orange juice and ignored him. He leaned on the counter, close enough that she could smell soap and something warm underneath, like skin that had been in the sun too long. You know what your problem is, he said. I don't have a problem. You have 100 problems, and they all involve the fact that you don't know how to relax. She set the glass down harder than necessary. I relax perfectly well. Name one thing you do for fun. I read. Case files don't count. I read novels. When was the last time you finished one? The pause that followed answered for her. She pressed her lips together, and something shifted in her expression. A crack, just for a second, before she patched it over with a look that could have frozen a courtroom. "My hobbies are none of your business." Owen set down his mug. For a moment, the teasing left his face. He looked at her the way someone looks at a clock that has been running fast for so long it has forgotten what the right time feels like. "Fair enough," he said quietly. He picked up his towel from the hook, grabbed his flip-flops from the rack, and walked to the porch. She heard the screen door close behind him and then the sound of the ocean filling the space he had left. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, juice in hand, and told herself the tightness in her chest was just the humidity. 3 knocks, sharp, deliberate, at 11:47 at night. Evelyn was already in the bathtub. The water was the perfect temperature, hot enough to turn her skin pink, cool enough to breathe. She had added the lavender salts she had packed in a Ziploc bag between her novels and her journal. The frosted window let in a sliver of moonlight, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, her shoulders were not sitting somewhere near her ears. Then the knocking. "Evelyn," she closed her eyes. "Go away. I need the bathtub. You have a shower." "A shower is not a bathtub. That is like saying a vending machine is the same as a restaurant." She sank lower until the water touched her chin. "Owen, I am in the bath. I can wait. You will wait a long time. I'm patient." "Since when?" A pause. Then his voice came through the door, lower, almost lazy. "Since I met someone worth waiting for." Her stomach flipped. She blamed the hot water. She absolutely, categorically blamed the hot water. "Good night, Owen." She heard him laugh softly on the other side, and then his footsteps faded down the hall. She stayed in the bathtub for another 20 minutes, but the silence felt different now. Fuller. Like someone had left a handprint on the steam. The next morning she found a note on the bathroom door. His handwriting was large and careless, leaning to the right like it was in a hurry. Bathtub request. Denied. Appeal pending. "Toby!" She tore it off the door. She did not throw it away. By the 4th day their rhythms had started to overlap in ways neither of them planned. She woke early, but he woke earlier. When she walked into the kitchen at 6:15, the coffee was already made. He never said anything about it. Just left the pot full and a clean mug beside it, always the same mug, the blue one with the chipped handle that she had chosen on the first morning. She noticed. She said nothing. He noticed that she noticed. He said nothing either, but the mug was always there. That afternoon the heat pressed against the windows like a hand. Evelyn changed into her swimsuit, a black one-piece with a low back that she had almost left at home because it felt too much for a solo vacation. She grabbed a towel, her sunglasses and a novel, and headed for the front door. Owen was on the porch, reading something on his phone. He looked up as she passed. He did not look away. "You're going to kill me," he said. Just like that. No whisper, no drama. The same tone he used to say the coffee was ready. Evelyn felt the words land somewhere beneath her ribs. She kept walking, eyes forward, flip-flops slapping the wooden steps. She did not turn around, but the heat on the back of her neck had nothing to do with the sun. She spread her towel on the sand, opened her book, and read the same paragraph 4 times. An hour later, Owen came down the steps toward the pool. She was back on the porch by then, legs tucked under her on the wide rattan chair, the novel finally starting to make sense. She looked up out of habit. He was wearing dark swim trunks that sat low on his hips. Water from the outdoor shower ran down his chest and caught the light in thin, scattered lines. His stomach was flat and hard, and there was a scar just below his left collarbone. Small, pale, the kind that came with a story no one had asked about yet. She looked back down at her book, then looked up again. He was watching her. Not smiling, not teasing, just watching with an expression that made the air between the porch and the pool feel like it had been pulled tight. She turned a page she had not read and stared at the words until they blurred. Owen dove into the pool. The splash broke the tension like a window cracking open. He surfaced, pushed his hair back and floated on his back with his eyes closed, arms spread wide, taking up the entire pool like he took up every room he entered. Evelyn watched him over the top of her book, the way the water moved around him, the way his breathing slowed until his chest barely rose. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, completely still, not performing, not provoking, just a man floating in the sun, trusting the water to hold him. Something softened in her chest, a small thing, a loosened thread. She pulled it back tight immediately. That evening she organized the pantry. She arranged the canned goods by category, the spices alphabetically, and the snacks on a separate shelf. Owen's chocolate collection, 4 bars in various states of consumption, she placed in a neat row on the lowest shelf, wrappers folded closed. He found them later and opened every single one. "You alphabetized my chocolate," he said from the kitchen. "I organized the pantry. You put the dark chocolate before the milk chocolate. D comes before M." He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, a piece of dark chocolate between his teeth. His eyes moved over her face slowly, like he was reading something written in a language he was still learning. "You are the most fascinating control freak I have ever met." She closed the pantry door. "And you are the most disorganized adult I have ever shared a kitchen with." He grinned. The chocolate had left a faint smudge at the corner of his mouth. She absolutely did not think about wiping it off. The pool was the bluest thing Evelyn had ever seen up close. Not the washed-out blue of office walls or courtroom carpet, but real blue. Deep and moving and alive, with the afternoon sun breaking into bright coins on the surface. She sat on the edge with her feet in the water, ankles crossed. Book in her lap. Hat pulled low enough to shade her eyes, but not low enough to block the view of Owen doing laps from one end to the other, like the pool was a personal highway. He surfaced at the shallow end, wiped his face, and looked at her. "Come in." "I'm reading." "You've been on that page for 15 minutes. She turned the page. "It's a complex chapter. It's upside down." She looked down. It was not upside down. She glared at him. He grinned. "Come on. The water is perfect." "I'm fine where I am." He swam toward her, resting his forearms on the edge of the pool near her legs. Water dripped from his hair onto the stone. He was close enough that she could see the individual drops sitting on his shoulders, catching light like scattered glass. "You haven't been in the pool once since you got here," he said. "I've been in up to my knees." "That doesn't count." "It absolutely counts." He tilted his head. His eyes moved from her face to the water and back. Something shifted in his expression. The teasing pulled back, replaced by something quieter. "You can't swim," he said. Not a question. Evelyn pressed her lips together. She stared at the page in her lap, at the words she could not read, because all of her attention was on the man looking at her, like he had just found a puzzle piece that had been missing from the picture. "It never came up," she said. "You're an adult who lives near a coast and it never came up." "I had other priorities, school, work. Passing the bar does not require a backstroke." He pushed off the wall and floated back a few feet. "I'll teach you." "No." "Why not?" "Because I am not getting in that pool with you and your big hands just touching me everywhere while you pretend to teach me something." The silence hit like a door slamming. Owen's eyebrows went up. Slowly, one at a time, like he was giving her a chance to hear what she had just said. Evelyn heard it. Her face went hot. Not warm. Hot. The kind of heat that starts at the neck and climbs fast. The kind that no hat in the world can hide. "I was offering to teach you to swim," he said, his voice careful, steady, almost gentle. "Not to put my hands on you." She stood up. The book fell from her lap. She did not pick it up. "I have to go inside." "Evelyn, goodbye." She walked toward the house with the posture of someone exiting a very unfavorable deposition. Straight back, fast steps, eyes forward. Owen stayed in the pool. He pressed his lips together. He looked at the sky. Then he laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in the chest and fills the air around it. He laughed until the water rippled. She heard it through the screen door. She hated that even his laugh sounded warm. 2 days passed. Evelyn avoided the pool. She read on the porch. She walked on the beach, but only along the dry sand well above where the waves reached. She reorganized the bookshelf in the living room twice. She made pasta with a lemon cream sauce that filled the kitchen with a scent so good, Owen came in from the porch without being called. They ate together at the island. and neither of them mentioned the pool. On the third afternoon, the heat won. She sat on the edge of the pool again, legs in the water, a glass of iced tea beside her. She wore a white cover-up over her swimsuit, and her hair was twisted up in a clip that left the back of her neck bare. Owen was already in the pool. He swam quietly for a while, back and forth, not looking at her. Then he dove under. She watched the surface. The water settled. No movement. She leaned forward. Nothing. She leaned a little more, scanning the blue for his shape, and then he rose right in front of her. Water rushed off his shoulders and she flinched, but before she could move, his mouth pressed against her bare stomach, a quick, firm bite, right above her navel, followed by a grin so wide she could feel it against her skin. She screamed, not a polite scream, the kind that sent two birds scattering from the nearest palm tree. She shoved his head away with both hands and scrambled to her feet. Her cover-up was soaked. Her iced tea was knocked over. Her heart was slamming against her ribs like it wanted out. "Are you insane?" she shouted. Owen was laughing so hard he had to hold the edge of the pool to stay above water. His eyes were squeezed shut, and his shoulders shook with each breath. You absolute—" She grabbed her towel, wrapped it around herself like armor, and stormed inside, calling him every name she could think of that was not technically a profanity. He stayed in the pool until his breathing evened out. Then he floated on his back again, staring at the sky, still smiling. Inside, Evelyn stood in the bathroom with the door locked. She pressed her hands to her face. Her skin was burning where his lips had been, a small circle just above her navel that pulsed like a second heartbeat. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were bright, and the woman staring back at her did not look angry. She looked alive. Evelyn turned off the light and sat on the edge of the bathtub in the dark, waiting for the feeling to pass. It did not. The smell of garlic hit the hallway before Evelyn reached the kitchen. Warm, golden, the kind of garlic that had been sliced thin and dropped into butter, not olive oil butter, and left to sizzle until the edges curled. She had not cooked dinner yet. She had planned to. There was a recipe on her phone, ingredients already sorted on the second shelf of the fridge, a mental schedule that started at 6:30 and ended with a clean kitchen by 8. It was 6:22. Someone had beaten her to it. Owen stood at the stove with a wooden spoon in one hand and his phone propped against the backsplash, playing something low and acoustic she did not recognize. He had rolled the sleeves of his shirt to his elbows, and the muscles in his forearms shifted each time he stirred. A cutting board sat beside him, covered in the rough chop of onions, peppers, and herbs she could not name from this distance. He did not look up. "There's wine on the counter if you want some," he said. She looked at the bottle. Red. Already open. A glass sitting beside it, waiting. "I was going to make dinner," she said. "You still can. I'm doing the steak. You can handle the rest. I did not agree to a joint dinner. The steak did. It's too much for one person." She stood in the doorway for 3 more seconds, arms crossed, watching him move through the kitchen like it was his, like every kitchen was his. He seasoned without measuring, adjusted the flame by instinct and tasted directly from the spoon, a habit that should have bothered her, but somehow did not. She poured herself the wine. They did not talk about it. She simply started pulling ingredients from the fridge, fresh pasta, cream, parmesan, a lemon she had bought at the market near the pier, and began working at the opposite end of the counter. He took the stove. She took the island. The kitchen was big enough for both of them, and for the first time since she arrived, the space between them did not feel like a battleground. It felt like something else. Owen glanced at her while she zested the lemon. Her fingers were precise, controlled, the way they probably were when she turned pages in a courtroom file. But her shoulders were lower than usual. Her jaw was not clenched. There was a small crease between her eyebrows that appeared when she concentrated, and he found himself watching it more than the steak. He looked away before she caught him. The pasta came together in 12 minutes. The steak rested on the cutting board, while she tossed the noodles in cream and lemon and a handful of parmesan that she grated fresh over the top. He sliced the meat thin, fanned it on a plate, and set it between them on the island. They ate, standing up. No table, no formality, just 2 people leaning against opposite sides of the counter with forks in their hands and a meal that had no right being that good for something unplanned. "This pasta," he said, pointing at it with his fork. "This is unreasonable. It's just lemon and cream. It's not just anything. Where did you learn this?" "My grandmother. She cooked the same way you do. No recipes, no timers. I used to sit on the counter and watch her." He looked at her. She had said it without thinking, and the softness in her voice surprised both of them. She took a sip of wine and changed the subject to the seasoning on the steak, and he let her. But he filed that image away, a young Evelyn sitting on a counter, watching someone cook with love, and kept it somewhere he would not lose. After that night, the kitchen was different. It became the one room where neither of them performed. He did not provoke. She did not organize. They simply cooked, sometimes together, sometimes side by side in comfortable silence, and the food was always better than it had any right to be. On the seventh evening, Evelyn was curled up in the corner of the sofa with a legal journal she had promised herself she would not bring, but had packed anyway. Owen walked in from the porch, looked at the journal, and stood in front of her. "No," he said. "No what?" "No reading that. Not tonight. This is a very important article about appellate procedure reform. I don't even know what half of those words mean, and I run a company." She turned the page. He reached down and took the journal from her hands. She grabbed for it, but he held it above his head, and the height difference made the effort pointless. "Owen, give it back. When was the last time you watched a movie?" "I don't see how that's relevant." "When?" She pressed her lips together. "I don't remember. That's the saddest thing anyone has said in this house, and I once told the plumber my shower only runs cold. Give me my journal." He tossed it onto the armchair across the room. She stood up to get it, but he was faster. His arm hooked around her waist, pulled her back, and dropped her onto the sofa cushions. Before she could push herself up, his fingers found her ribs. She was ticklish, violently, desperately ticklish. "Owen, stop! I swear." He did not stop. He found the spot just below her last rib, where the laugh turned involuntary. The breathless, hiccuping kind that made her whole body curl. She tried to push his hands away, but he was stronger, and completely without mercy. "Say you'll watch a movie." "Never." He found the other side. She shrieked. "Say it." "Fine, fine. I'll watch your stupid movie." He stopped. She lay on the sofa, gasping, hair falling across her face, cheeks red, eyes bright with tears from laughing. He sat back on the opposite end, picked up the remote, and turned on the television as if nothing had happened. She watched him for a long moment, chest still heaving. Then she pulled a cushion into her lap, tucked her feet under her, and stayed. He chose a comedy. She laughed 3 times in the first 20 minutes. By the end, she was leaning slightly toward the center of the sofa, not touching him, not close enough to call it anything, but closer than she had been at the start. He noticed. He said nothing. The next night, she sat down on the sofa at 9 without being asked. He handed her the remote. "So your turn to pick," he said. She chose a courtroom drama. He groaned. She smiled. They watched the whole thing. It started with his hand on her waist. She was reaching for the top shelf in the kitchen, stretching on her toes for the jar of sun-dried tomatoes she had pushed too far back. Her shirt lifted just enough to expose a strip of skin above her shorts. Owen walked in behind her, placed one hand on her waist, not grabbing, just resting, and reached over her head with the other to pull the jar down. He set it on the counter beside her. His hand stayed 1 second longer than it needed to. "Thanks," she said, and her voice came out different, thinner, like the word had passed through something narrow on its way out. "Any time." He left the kitchen. She stood there holding the jar, feeling the ghost of his palm against her hip like a warm stain on cotton. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday they were cooking again. Chicken this time, something with rosemary and lemon that he had improvised after finding what she had left in the fridge. She was telling him about a case she had won the previous year, one involving a landlord who had tried to evict a family by changing the locks while they were at a funeral. She told it the way she told most things, fast, precise, with a rhythm that made every sentence land exactly where she aimed it. She said something sharp about the opposing counsel's closing argument, something that caught him off guard with how clever it was. He was standing beside her at the island, slicing a lemon, and before either of them could think about it, he leaned over and kissed the corner of her mouth. Not her lips, not her cheek, the exact corner where the two met. He went back to the lemon. Evelyn stopped talking. Her hands went still over the cutting board. The rosemary she had been pulling from the stem sat in a small green pile, forgotten. She stared at the counter for 5 full seconds. He did not look at her. He did not explain. He just kept slicing, and the kitchen filled with the bright, sharp scent of citrus, as if nothing had happened. She picked up the rosemary and kept going. But her fingers trembled once, just once, and she pressed them flat against the counter until they stopped. Thursday was the neck. She was on the porch in the late afternoon, reading one of the novels she had finally started, actually reading it now, not pretending. Her hair was up. The back of her neck was bare, still flushed from the sun, and a single bead of sweat sat just below her hairline. Owen came through the screen door with 2 glasses of iced tea. He set hers on the small table beside her chair. Then he bent down. His lips brushed the side of her neck, just below her ear, light enough to be nothing and heavy enough to be everything. She did not move. He walked to the railing and leaned against it, drinking his tea, looking at the ocean. She picked up her glass. The ice rattled because her hand was not steady. She took a sip, set it down, and opened her book again. The words swam. He knew exactly what he was doing. That was the part that undid her the most. Every touch had the same quality, unhurried, unforced, placed with the precision of someone who had thought about it before doing it, but wanted it to look like he had not. And every time, he pulled away before she had to decide what it meant. He gave her just enough to feel it, and then gave her space to breathe. It was maddening. It was working. The days blurred into a pattern that neither of them acknowledged. Coffee at 6:30. His pot, her mug, the blue one always. Breakfast together, sometimes quiet, sometimes not. He liked eggs with hot sauce. She liked fruit and yogurt with granola, so perfectly layered it looked like a photograph. He teased her about the layers. She told him hot sauce before 8 in the morning was a personality disorder. He laughed every time. Mornings bled into afternoons. She read on the porch while he swam. He read in the hammock while she walked the beach. They crossed paths in the kitchen, in the hallway at the foot of the stairs, and each crossing left something behind. A look held too long, a sentence that trailed off without a clear reason, a silence that neither of them rushed to fill. He was still bossy. That had not changed. When she tried to skip lunch to read, he brought a plate to the porch and stood there until she ate. When she stayed up past midnight reviewing case notes she had brought just in case, he walked into her room, closed her laptop, and told her the briefs would survive without her. "You can't just close my laptop." "I just did." "Owen." "Sleep, Evelyn." She should have argued. A week ago she would have. But the way he said her name, low, steady, with a weight that had nothing to do with authority and everything to do with care, made the argument dissolve before it reached her mouth. She slept. On Friday night they were on the sofa again. It was the 5th night in a row. The movie was halfway through, something with subtitles that she had picked because she thought it would annoy him, but he was watching it with more attention than she expected. Her feet were tucked under a cushion. His arm was along the back of the sofa, not around her, not touching her, but there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of it behind her shoulders like sunlight through a window. She shifted. Her head settled against his shoulder. She did not look at him. He did not move. They stayed like that until the credits rolled. When the screen went dark, he turned his head just enough that his lips were near her hair. "Good night, counselor," he said. She stood up without looking at him, walked to her room and closed the door. She leaned against it, pressed her hand to her chest, and counted the heartbeat she could feel pushing against her palm. Owen sat in the dark living room for a long time after that. The television was off. The ocean whispered through the open windows. He ran his hand over the cushion where she had been sitting, still warm, and closed his eyes. He was in trouble. The kind of trouble that no board meeting, no quarterly report, no corner office with a skyline view had ever prepared him for. The quiet, devastating kind, the routine of a couple. That was what it looked like from the outside, and Evelyn knew it. She knew because she caught herself setting 2 places at the island without thinking, because she started buying the dark chocolate he preferred when she went to the small market down the road, because when she heard the shower running in his bathroom, she pictured him standing under the water and the image stayed longer than it should. She did not say any of this out loud. She filed it under temporary side effects of proximity and moved on. But the side effects were getting worse. Owen had started choosing what they ate for dinner. Not asking. Choosing. On Tuesday, she stood in front of the open fridge for a full minute, reading the shelves like a menu she could not commit to, and he walked up behind her, closed the fridge door with one hand and said, "We're making shrimp." "I didn't agree to shrimp." "You didn't agree to anything. You've been staring at the fridge like it owes you money." She opened her mouth, closed it. He was already pulling a bag of shrimp from the freezer. They made shrimp. On Wednesday, she reached for her laptop at 9:30. He took it from her hands, set it on the bookshelf, and pointed at the sofa. She called him impossible. He said he preferred the word decisive. She sat down. He put on a movie about a man who sails across the Atlantic alone, and she fell asleep with her head on the armrest before the man even left the harbor. On Thursday, he told her she was learning to swim. "No, you live near the ocean and you can't float. That's not a choice, that's a hazard. I have survived 31 years without floating, and I'm not letting you get to 32 the same way." She looked at him. He was standing in the kitchen, coffee in hand, shirtless as usual, and there was nothing playful in his expression. His jaw was set. His eyes were steady. It was the face of a man who had already made a decision and was simply informing her of it. "I'm not getting in the pool with you," she said. "You are." "Owen." "Evelyn." They stood on opposite sides of the island, a plate of toast and a jar of jam between them, and for a long moment neither moved. Then he set his mug down, walked around the island, and took her hand. Not her wrist, her hand. His fingers laced through hers, warm and firm, and his thumb pressed against the center of her palm. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. "Not in the water. Not anywhere." She looked at their hands. His was twice the size of hers, rough at the edges, brown from the sun, with a thin scar across the knuckle of his index finger. Her own hand looked pale and small inside his, and the sight of it made her chest feel tight in a way she could not explain. She pulled her hand back. "Fine. But if you do anything stupid, I'm getting out. Deal." 20 minutes later, she was standing in the shallow end of the pool in her black swimsuit, water at her waist, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though the air was 90 degrees. Owen stood in front of her, waist-deep, hands at his sides, giving her space she had not asked for but needed. "First thing," he said, "lean back. Into the water. I'll hold you. I don't want you to hold me. Then you'll sink." She chewed her lip. He waited. He did not step closer. He did not reach for her. He just stood there, water lapping at his ribs, patient in a way that did not match anything she knew about him. She leaned back. His hands came up beneath her, one at the small of her back, one between her shoulder blades. The touch was steady and impersonal, like a doctor checking a pulse, and she hated how much she wished it were not. "Relax your legs," he said. "They are relaxed. They are stiff as rebar. That is their natural state." He laughed. A short, quiet sound that vibrated through his hands and into her back. She felt it travel the length of her spine. "Close your eyes," he said. She closed them. The sun was warm on her face. The water moved beneath her in slow, rocking pulses. His hands held firm, and she could feel the rough texture of his palms through the thin fabric of her swimsuit. The pool filter hummed. A bird called from somewhere beyond the fence, and for 30 seconds, she floated. Then she opened her eyes and found his face directly above hers, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to count the water drops sitting on his jaw. His expression was careful, controlled, but something underneath it was not. Something behind his eyes was working very hard to stay still. She sat up fast. Water splashed between them. "Okay," she said, "that's enough for today." He let her go. He stepped back, but his hands stayed in the water for a moment, fingers curled like they were holding the shape of her. They practiced every afternoon. She learned to float, then to kick, then to move through the water with clumsy strokes that made him bite his lip to keep from laughing. He corrected her arms, adjusted her breathing, and never once touched her more than necessary, which was both exactly what she wanted and the opposite of what she wanted, and she refused to examine that contradiction. On the fourth day of lessons, she made it from one end of the pool to the other without stopping. She surfaced at the wall, gasping, hair plastered to her face, and looked at him. He was leaning against the opposite wall, arms crossed on the edge, watching her with an expression she had never seen before. Pride, not the smug kind, not the teasing kind, the real kind, the kind that sits in the eyes and does not need a single word. She pushed her hair out of her face. "Well? Not bad, counselor." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling, and this time she did not turn away to hide it. That night, the ritual repeated. Movie, sofa, 2 feet of space between them. But when the film reached a scene where the couple stood in the rain and stared at each other with the kind of desperate longing that only works on screen, she felt Owen's gaze shift from the television to her. She did not look back. She kept her eyes on the screen, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing carefully even. But she felt him looking. She felt it the way you feel the sun when you step out of shade. Sudden, warm, impossible to ignore. The movie ended. She said goodnight. He said goodnight. She lay in bed for an hour, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on the place where his palm had pressed against her back in the pool, and thought about the gold flecks in his eyes, and the way his hands had held her like something that could break but would not. She rolled over and pressed her face into the pillow. This was supposed to be a vacation. Owen Bennett had run a company with 200 employees, closed deals across 3 time zones, and once negotiated a contract so complex the lawyers on both sides needed translators. He did not lose composure. Not in boardrooms, not in crisis meetings, not when a factory shipment arrived 3 weeks late and half the parts were wrong. But Evelyn Reynolds had started wearing her hair down. It was a small thing. Stupid, maybe. For the first week she had kept it up, twisted, clipped, pulled back in a knot that said, "Do not approach." Then one morning she came to the kitchen with it loose, falling past her shoulders in dark waves that caught the light from the window and smelled like the coconut shampoo she kept on the second shelf of the bathroom. He burned the eggs. She asked if he was feeling all right. He said the pan was too hot. She looked at the pan, then at him, and said nothing. But something in the corner of her mouth twitched, and he realized with uncomfortable clarity that she knew exactly what she was doing. He was losing ground. Slowly, 1 square inch at a time, the careful distance he maintained was shrinking, and it was not because he wanted it to. It was because she existed in every room of the house, and every room smelled like her, and every surface held the trace of her hands. The folded towels, the labeled containers in the fridge, the single fresh flower she cut from the garden and put in a glass on the kitchen windowsill each morning. He had never noticed someone's habits this closely. He had never wanted to. So he did what he always did when he felt the ground shifting. He moved forward. The touches started with logic. A hand on her waist when passing behind her in the narrow kitchen. Reasonable, practical. The space was tight and 2 people cooking needed to navigate around each other. The first time he did it, she stiffened but kept stirring. The second time, she did not stiffen. The third time she leaned back, just barely, just enough that her shoulder blade touched his chest, and then straightened as if it had never happened. He felt that lean for the rest of the day. Then came the kisses. Small ones, placed with the precision of someone testing a boundary and finding it softer than expected. She made a joke one evening, something dry and cutting about the way he folded shirts, which was not folding at all, but a kind of aggressive crumpling, and the words landed so perfectly, so unexpectedly, that he laughed and kissed the corner of her mouth before he could think about it. She froze. Her lips parted. Her eyes met his for a half-second that stretched like pooled glass, and then she looked away and continued folding his shirt with aggressive precision. He stood there, heart beating faster than it had any business beating, and thought, "I'm done. Not done with her. Done pretending." But he did not say it. Not yet. Because he had spent enough years watching people to know that Evelyn Reynolds did not do well with sudden revelations. She needed time. She needed to arrive at the truth on her own terms, in her own order, like organizing a shelf. Category first, then alphabetical, then size. So he kept the touches small. A kiss on her neck when she read on the veranda. His thumb tracing her wrist when she handed him a plate. The back of his fingers brushing her arm when they stood on the porch watching the sunset. Never pushing, never asking. Just showing up over and over in ways she could not file under temporary, and she started filing them anyway. He could see it, the way she rationalized each moment. The hand on her waist was about the tight kitchen. The corner kiss was impulsive. The neck kiss was just him being annoying. She had an explanation for everything, and she held on to each one like a lawyer clutching precedent. But her body told a different story. She tilted her head when he touched her neck. She stepped back instead of forward when he passed behind her, closing the gap instead of widening it. Her breathing changed when he was close, not faster, but deeper, as if she was trying to take in more air to make room for what she was feeling. He noticed all of it, every time. The evenings had become their country. Coffee together at dawn was polite. Cooking together was practical. But the sofa at night, that was theirs. They argued about movies, debated plot holes with the intensity of opposing counsel, and laughed at scenes that were not even that funny, because the laughter had become a shared language. She stopped reaching for her laptop after dinner. He noticed, but said nothing. She started choosing the movies on alternate nights. He let her, even when she picked documentaries about ocean conservation that made him fall asleep within 20 minutes. She would nudge his leg with her foot when she caught him dozing, and he would open one eye and say he was resting his eyes, and she would say his eyes were snoring. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of things that build a life so quietly you do not notice the foundation going in. One evening she sat at the island reviewing something on her phone, not work for once, but a recipe she wanted to try. He came up beside her to look at the screen, and instead of leaning over her shoulder, he rested his chin on top of her head. She went completely still. He could feel her breathing against his chest. He could smell the coconut shampoo and something underneath it. Warm skin, clean cotton, a scent he would never be able to name but would recognize in any room for the rest of his life. She did not move away. They stayed like that for 10 seconds. 15. Then her phone buzzed with a notification and the spell cracked, and she pulled away to read it. "My colleague," she said, "asking about a filing. Tell him you're busy." Her. "And I'm not busy. I'm standing in a kitchen." "You're busy," he said, and his voice was lower than he meant it to be. She looked up at him. Her eyes searched his face, and for one honest, unguarded second, he saw it. The same thing he felt, looking back at him from behind all that careful composure. Then she blinked, and it was gone. "I should respond," she said. "You should." She typed a message. He made hot chocolate. They sat on the porch in the dark, mugs warming their hands, the ocean invisible but constant, its sound filling the silence between them like a third voice in the conversation. She fell asleep in the rattan chair. He carried her to her room, set her on the bed, pulled the sheet over her legs, and stood in the doorway for a moment too long. She murmured something in her sleep. It might have been his name. He closed the door quietly and went to his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and pressed his hands against his face. 6 years he had come to this house alone. 6 years the silence had been the point. Now the silence had a shape, and the shape was her, and he could not imagine this house without her in it. He lay back and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the ocean kept its rhythm. Inside, his heart had found a new one. The ocean had never looked this close. Evelyn stood at the edge of the sand where the water reached on its longest stretch, watching the foam dissolve around her toes. Behind her, the beach house glowed warm in the late afternoon light. Ahead, the sea moved in slow breathing waves, in and out, like something alive and patient. She had been at the beach for almost 2 weeks and had not once gone past her ankles. Owen walked up beside her. He was barefoot, wearing shorts and an old t-shirt with a faded logo she could not read. He did not say anything. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the horizon like he was waiting for something to arrive. "I want to go in," she said. He turned his head. She kept her eyes on the water. I've been watching it every day from the porch, from the pool, from the window, and I want to know what it feels like." "Okay, but I'm scared." The word came out small, smaller than anything she had said in his presence. Evelyn Reynolds did not say scared. She said concerned or cautious or pragmatic, but standing at the edge of the Atlantic with wet sand pulling at her feet, the honest word found its way out before she could edit it. Owen pulled his hands from his pockets. He offered his arm, not his hand, his arm. Bent at the elbow, steady, like an anchor wrapped in skin. She took it. They walked in together. The water was warm at first, then cooler as it rose past her shins. She gripped his arm tighter when it reached her thighs. Her fingers pressed into the muscle below his shoulder, and she could feel the tension in his body. Not nervous, just alert, coiled, ready to move if she needed him to. The water climbed to her waist. A wave pushed against her stomach, and the ground beneath her feet shifted. Just a little, just enough to remind her that the ocean did not care about her schedule or her plans or her need to control every variable. It moved when it wanted to. It pulled when it wanted to. The fear hit her hard. Not a thought, a feeling. A full-body lurch of panic that came from somewhere below her ribs and shot upward through her chest and into her throat. She jumped, not sideways, not backward, into him. Her legs wrapped around his waist. Her arms locked behind his neck. She pressed herself against him with the desperate force of someone grabbing the only solid thing in a shifting world. Her face was in his neck. Her breath was fast and hot against his skin, and she could feel his pulse beating strong and steady beneath her mouth. Owen did not stumble. He did not laugh. His arms came around her, one beneath her thighs, one across her back, and he held her the way you hold something precious that has just been handed to you without warning. They stood there. The water moved around them, but he did not move. He was a wall, a foundation. The waves broke against his back and split around them like the sea had agreed to go around. Her breathing slowed. Her grip loosened, not all the way, but enough to lift her head. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes were dark brown in the fading light, and the gold flecks she had noticed in the pool were there again, catching the last of the sun. Water sat on his jaw, on his lashes, on the curve of his lower lip. His hair was pushed back and dripping, and his hands held her steady against him with a pressure that said nothing in the world could pull her away. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest. It was not steady anymore. He turned his head. Slowly. His lips touched her shoulder. Not a kiss, just a landing. Then he moved along the line of her neck, up the side, each press of his mouth deliberate and unhurried, as if he were memorizing the map of her skin. She felt the warmth of his breath at each stop, the soft drag of his lower lip, the faint scratch of stubble that sent a current down her spine. Her fingers curled into the wet hair at the back of his head. He reached her jaw, paused. His mouth hovered at the corner of hers, the same spot he had kissed days ago in the kitchen, the spot she had touched with her fingertips afterward and could not stop thinking about. Then he kissed her, not gently, not carefully. The kiss was the opposite of everything careful she had built around herself. It was full and consuming and tasted like salt water and want. His hand slid up her back and pressed between her shoulder blades, pulling her closer, and she let him. She let him because her body had decided before her mind could object, and for the first time in years, she did not fight the verdict. The ocean moved around them. The sky turned from gold to pink, and Evelyn kissed him back with everything she had been pretending she did not feel. The gratitude for the coffee every morning, the ache when he touched her waist, the way her chest tightened every time he laughed, the terrifying, undeniable truth that this man had walked into her carefully constructed life and rearranged every shelf. When they broke apart, she was trembling. Not from cold. He pressed his forehead against hers. His breathing was rough. His hands were still on her back, fingers spread wide. "I should take you inside," he said. She nodded against him. He carried her out of the water, not because she asked, but because her legs were still wrapped around him, and she showed no sign of letting go, and he showed no interest in suggesting it. He walked across the sand, up the wooden steps, through the screen door, and set her down on the sofa. She looked up at him. Her hair was tangled and dripping. Her eyes were wide and bright and terrified in the way that only honest things are terrifying. He knelt in front of her, pushed a strand of wet hair off her forehead. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, and his expression, the one she had spent 2 weeks trying to read, was finally completely clear. Then her stomach growled, loud, rude, the kind of sound that belongs in a cafeteria, not a love scene. Owen dropped his head and laughed. The sound was warm and real and shook his whole body. She covered her face with both hands and groaned. "I hate my body," she muttered through her fingers. He stood, still laughing, and pulled her off the sofa by the hands. He walked her to the kitchen, lifted her onto the island counter and opened the fridge. "Stay there," he said. "I can help. Sit, watch. Try to enjoy something without organizing it." She sat on the counter with her legs dangling, wet hair dripping onto the granite, and watched him cook. He moved through the kitchen like it belonged to him, reaching, chopping, stirring, and every few minutes he walked over and kissed her. Quick, firm kisses stolen between stirs of the pan, a kiss on her mouth while the garlic browned, a kiss on her forehead while the water boiled, a kiss on the back of her hand while she held a piece of bread he had torn off for her. She laughed, really laughed, the kind that started in her chest and climbed out before she could catch it. He looked at her when she did, and his face did something she had not seen before. It softened completely, like a fist unclenching. They ate on the sofa. Pasta and bread and a salad he threw together with whatever was left in the crisper. She sat with her legs across his lap, and he rested one hand on her ankle while he ate with the other. They talked about nothing, about the movie they had watched the night before, about the market down the road, and whether the old man who sold mangoes was flirting with her or just being friendly, about how the ceiling fan made a clicking sound every third rotation that she wanted to fix, and he refused to notice. Normal things, small things, the things that stitch two people together when neither is paying attention. When the plates were empty, he pulled her closer. She came without resisting. He kissed her slowly this time. No salt water, no panic, no waves. Just the two of them on a sofa that had become the center of their world, with the taste of garlic and bread between them, and the sound of the ocean outside the open windows. That night, in the quiet house with the fan clicking overhead and the sheets still cool from the air conditioning, they came together for the first time. It was not rushed. It was not scripted. It was the kind of closeness that happens when two people have spent weeks circling each other and finally stop. He touched her like she was a language he wanted to learn slowly. Every curve memorized, every sound catalogued, every response met with attention that made her feel seen in a way no courtroom victory ever had. His hands moved with care and intent, learning what made her breath catch, what made her grip tighten, what made her whisper his name like it was something sacred. She let herself be open, fully, without a list or a plan or an exit strategy. And when he pulled her against his chest afterward, his heartbeat loud against her ear, she pressed her palm flat over it and thought that this exact rhythm, this exact warmth, was worth every single argument, every towel on the chair, every chocolate bar left open on the counter. He kissed the top of her head. She closed her eyes. Outside, the ocean breathed in and out, steady as always. Inside, two people who had started as strangers and enemies and reluctant roommates lay tangled together in the dark, and the house felt, for the first time, exactly the right size. Sunlight came through the window in a long, warm stripe that landed across Owen's chest. He was sleeping on his back, one arm stretched across the empty side of the bed where she had been, the other resting on his stomach. His face was turned toward the window, jaw relaxed, lips slightly parted, and he looked younger than 37. He looked like a man with nothing to prove. Evelyn stood in the bathroom doorway, watching him. She had slipped out 10 minutes earlier, brushed her teeth, splashed water on her face and stared at herself in the mirror, with the expression of someone trying to reconcile who she was yesterday with who she was now. The woman in the mirror had messy hair, flushed cheeks, and a softness around the eyes that had not been there 2 weeks ago. She did not hate it. She padded back toward the bed, and that was when the phone on the nightstand buzzed. His phone. Face up, screen lit. She reached for it without thinking, the instinct of someone used to answering buzzing devices at all hours. She meant to flip it over, or push it toward him, or simply check if it was an alarm. But the message was already there, glowing on the screen in a white bubble. "I miss you so much. When are you coming home?" The name above it was Margaret, a woman's name, a heart emoji next to it in the contact. The ground tilted. Evelyn set the phone down like it had burned her. She took a step back, then another. Her chest was doing something strange, tightening, folding inward, the same feeling she got before closing arguments when the case was slipping away. She looked at Owen. Still sleeping? Still peaceful? Still the man who had carried her out of the ocean and kissed her on the sofa and held her like she mattered more than anything in the room. The hurt arrived first, quiet and sharp, like a needle pressed slowly into the center of her palm. Then the anger followed, louder, faster, flooding in behind the hurt like a wave that had been waiting for the wall to crack. "Owen!" He did not move. "Owen!" His eyes opened, groggy, confused, reaching for her by instinct before his brain caught up. He found her standing 3 feet from the bed, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes bright with something that was not tears but close. "What? Who is Margaret?" He blinked. The name did not register on his face the way she expected. No flinch, no guilt, just confusion, slow and genuine, like she had asked him a riddle in a language he had just woken into. "What are you talking about?" She grabbed the phone and held it up. "Margaret misses you. Wants to know when you're coming home, heart emoji. Who is she?" Owen looked at the screen, then at Evelyn, then at the screen again. He laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a careful one. A full, chest-shaking, head-thrown-back laugh that filled the entire room and bounced off the walls and made the bed shake beneath him. Evelyn's blood went cold, then hot, then something beyond temperature entirely. She grabbed a pillow off the bed and swung it at him. It connected with the side of his head with a satisfying thud. He kept laughing. She grabbed another pillow and threw it harder. "You think this is funny?" She reached for the decorative cushion on the chair. "You think I'm going to stand here while you absolute, after last night?" The cushion hit his shoulder. He caught it with one hand, still laughing, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. She reached for the last pillow on the bed, but before she could swing, his arm shot out and caught her around the waist. He pulled her onto the bed. She fell against him, struggling, furious, her fists pressing against his chest as he pinned her gently beneath him with his weight. His face was above hers, still smiling, still annoyingly, impossibly amused. "Let me go." "Not a chance." "Owen, I swear, Margaret is my aunt." She stopped. Her hands were still pressed against his chest, fingers curled into fists, but the rest of her went still. "She raised me," he said. His voice was quieter now, the laughter fading into something warmer. "After my mother died, I was 4. Margaret took me in, fed me, put me through school, drove me to every practice and every interview and every terrible first day. She's the only reason I'm anything." He reached for the phone, unlocked it, turned the screen toward her. The contact photo showed a woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled into a low bun, brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. She was smiling at the camera with her arm around Owen, who looked 10 years younger in the picture and was grinning the same way he grinned when Evelyn said something that made him laugh. The heart emoji made sense now. Evelyn stared at the photo. Then she covered her face with both hands and let out a groan that came from somewhere deep in her embarrassment. I feel completely ridiculous." He lowered himself onto his elbow beside her. His hand found her wrist and gently pulled one hand away from her face. His lips pressed against her jaw, slow and deliberate. "You're jealous," he murmured against her skin. "I'm not jealous, I'm justifiably concerned. You threw 4 pillows at my head." That was anger, different emotion. His mouth moved to her neck. His voice dropped lower. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever argued with. That is not a compliment. It is the highest compliment I know." His lips traced the line beneath her ear. "You don't need to worry about anyone else. There is no one else. There hasn't been anyone who made me feel like this." He paused. His breath was warm on her collarbone. "I'm in love with you, Evelyn." The words landed in the room like something heavy set down gently. She pulled her other hand away from her face. He was looking at her with no armor, no sarcasm, No teasing half-smile, just Owen, raw and open and more honest than she had ever seen him. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned. She pressed her lips together and swallowed twice before the words would come. "I'm in love with you too." He closed his eyes, just for a second, like he needed to hold the moment still before it moved on. Then he kissed her, slowly. The kind of kiss that does not lead anywhere but is everything on its own. Lips soft, hands gentle, foreheads touching when they pulled apart. They stayed in bed for a long time that morning, not talking, not needing to. He traced patterns on her arm with his fingertip, while she rested her head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat, and the world outside the window, the waves, the birds, the wind in the palm trees, played on without them. When they finally got up, he made coffee. She made toast. They moved through the kitchen without speaking, but their hands found each other every time they crossed paths. A touch on the hip, a squeeze of the fingers, a brush of knuckles against the small of her back. Everything was the same. The kitchen, the island, the blue mug with the chipped handle. But nothing was the same at all. The last days at the beach house moved differently. Not faster, not slower, just closer. As if the walls of the house had shifted inward, and every room had become the size of the space between two people who no longer pretended they did not want to be near each other. Owen stopped inventing excuses to touch her. He just touched her. His hand found the small of her back when they walked to the porch, his arm wrapped around her waist when she stood at the counter. His lips found her temple when she said something that made him feel more than he expected. There were no more strategies, no more games, just the honest, constant need to be close. Evelyn stopped pretending she did not want it. She leaned into him when he stood behind her. She reached for his hand during movies without looking down. She kissed the inside of his wrist one morning while he poured coffee, and the gesture was so small and so deliberate that he set the pot down and stood still for 3 full seconds, staring at the place where her lips had been. She noticed. She smiled into her mug. On their last full day, they cooked dinner together for the final time. He grilled steaks on the porch while she made a salad with avocado and lime, and the last of the tomatoes from the market. The kitchen smelled like charcoal and citrus, and the sky outside was doing that thing it did every evening, turning into colors that had no names, colors that existed only here, only now, only for the time it took to watch them disappear. They ate on the porch. No plates in their laps this time. She had set the small wooden table with the mismatched dishes from the cabinet, a candle she found in a drawer, and a glass of wine for each of them. It looked like something she would have rolled her eyes at 2 weeks ago. A romantic dinner. A gesture. But it was her gesture, and that made Owen look at it like it was the most important table ever set. "You're staring," she said. "I'm admiring. It's just a table." "It's not just a table." She looked down at her plate. He watched the candlelight move across her face, the line of her nose, the curve of her lower lip, the small crease between her eyebrows that appeared when she was thinking too hard about something she did not want to say. "I don't want to leave tomorrow," she said quietly. He set his fork down. "Then don't. I have a job, a lease, a life that exists outside this house." "So do I." "Then you understand." "I understand that none of those things matter as much as you think they do." She looked up. Her eyes were steady, but her voice was not. This was supposed to be a vacation, a break, 2 weeks of doing nothing, and then back to normal. "Is that what you want? Normal?" The candle flickered. A moth landed on the railing and sat there, wings folded, like it was waiting for her answer too. "No," she said. "That's the problem." He reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb moved across her knuckles in a slow line that she felt in every nerve of her body. "We go back to the city," he said. "We figure it out. This does not end because the rental does. You don't know that. I know that I just spent 2 weeks with the most stubborn, organized, impossible woman I have ever met, and the thought of waking up without her in the next room makes me feel like someone pulled the floor out from under me." She pressed her lips together. Hard. The kind of press that holds back something bigger. "You don't fight fair," she whispered. "I never said I did." They cleaned up in silence. He washed, she dried. The same routine, the same positions, the same quiet rhythm that had become theirs without either of them naming it. When the last dish was in the cabinet, she folded the towel, hung it on the hook, and turned to find him standing behind her. He cupped her face in both hands. His palms were warm and damp from the water, and they smelled like dish soap and the faint trace of charcoal from the grill. He kissed her forehead first, then the bridge of her nose, then her mouth, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that carries the weight of a promise still being formed. She held onto his wrists and kissed him back. That night, they did not watch a movie. They lay on the sofa with the lights off and the windows open, listening to the ocean breathe. Her head was on his chest. His hand was in her hair. The ceiling fan clicked every third rotation, and neither of them wanted to fix it anymore. Owen? If we get back and this falls apart, it won't. But if, it won't. His hand tightened in her hair, just slightly. I've never been more sure of anything. She pressed her face into his chest and let herself believe him, not because she had evidence, not because the logic checked out, but because some things do not need a case file or a closing argument. Some things just need someone who shows up every morning with coffee already made, and a half-eaten chocolate bar on the counter, and a look that says, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. He stayed awake, holding her, watching the moonlight move across the floor, and thinking that the best deal he had ever made was the one he almost walked away from. A shared house, a stubborn woman, and a summer that changed everything. Boxes. Suitcases. A car trunk that refused to close on the first try. Evelyn packed the way she did everything, with method. Clothes folded and layered by category. Toiletries sealed in labeled bags. Novels stacked in the order she had finished them, spines aligned. The house looked emptier with every item she removed, and each bare shelf felt like a sentence she did not want to finish. Owen leaned against the hallway wall, arms crossed, watching her strip the bed with military precision. You fold sheets like you're presenting evidence. Clean corners matter. To whom? To me. To civilization. He picked up the pillow she had set aside and held it to his face, then put it down and said nothing. But she saw him do it, and the tightness in her chest climbed a notch higher. They loaded the cars in silence. His rental was parked beside hers in the gravel driveway, and the two vehicles sat side by side like a question neither had fully answered. They had talked about it, going back, staying in touch, making it work, but talk and reality were different species, and Evelyn knew it. The drive was 4 hours. She followed him for the first 2, his car a steady shape ahead of hers on the coastal highway. Then the road split. He turned north. She turned northwest. The last thing she saw was his hand out the window, raised, palm flat against the wind. She drove the rest of the way with the radio off. Her apartment smelled like stale air, and the lavender plug-in she had forgotten to unplug before leaving. The fridge held a yogurt past its date and half a bottle of sparkling water. Her desk was exactly as she had left it, files stacked, laptop centered, a pen aligned beside a legal pad filled with notes for a case she could barely remember caring about. She set her suitcase by the door and stood in the middle of her living room. It was quiet, the kind of quiet she used to crave. Now it just felt hollow. Her phone buzzed at 7 that evening. Home, apartment is too clean, feels wrong without your shoes blocking the hallway. Oh, she smiled before she could stop herself. Typed back, my hallway is perfectly clear, unlike yours, I assume. His reply came fast. There's a chocolate bar on the counter already. Felt like the right move. She laughed. Alone, in her kitchen, standing in front of a fridge that had nothing in it worth eating. She laughed, and the sound bounced off the walls and came back to her with no one to catch it. She went grocery shopping the next morning. A proper trip. Produce, protein, the good olive oil she liked. She organized the fridge by shelf, washed the counters, and started a load of laundry. Routine, structure. The scaffolding of a life that had worked perfectly well before a barefoot man with a chocolate bar had rearranged her entire understanding of what well meant. Owen called at lunch. What are you doing? Organizing. Of course you are. Have you eaten? I'm about to. What? A salad. A salad is not lunch. A salad is a side effect of lunch. Goodbye, Owen. She hung up, still smiling. He called back 2 minutes later to tell her that his building had a mailroom on the ground floor and a doorman named Phil who had already asked about his tan. "Where do you live?" she asked. He told her. She set the phone down, picked it up, set it down again. He lived 12 blocks away. 12 blocks. In a city of millions, in a sprawl of neighborhoods and highways and zip codes, the man she had fought with over a bathtub lived 12 blocks from her front door. She called him back. 12 blocks, she said. "I know." "How long have you lived there?" 3 years. "I've been at my place for 4. We've been 12 blocks apart for 3 years. The universe has a sense of humor." She leaned against the counter and stared at the ceiling. The lavender plug-in hummed. Outside, a siren passed and faded. "Come over," she said. "Tonight, I'll make pasta." "The lemon cream one?" "If you bring dessert." "I'll bring chocolate." "That is not dessert." "It is in my world." She hung up and opened the fridge. She pulled out lemons, garlic, cream. She set water to boil and chopped parsley and grated cheese with the same focus she brought to trial preparation, but her hands were shaking. Just a little. Just enough to notice. At 7:15 her doorbell rang. She opened it and found Owen in a clean shirt, dark jeans, and that same easy posture that made every room feel smaller the moment he entered. He was holding a paper bag in one hand and a bar of dark chocolate in the other. "Dessert," he said, lifting the chocolate. "What's in the bag?" "Actual dessert in case you complained." She stepped aside. He walked in. He looked around her apartment, the neat shelves, the labeled containers, the perfectly aligned books, and nodded once, slowly, like a man confirming a theory he had already proven. "This is exactly what I expected," he said. "Is that a compliment?" He set the bag on the counter, turned to her and kissed her. Not quick, not stolen. A proper, deliberate kiss that tasted like the mint he had chewed on the way over, and pressed her back against the kitchen counter until the edge dug into her spine, and she did not care. "Yes," he said against her mouth. "It is." She pulled him by the shirt toward the stove. "Help me cook." He smiled, the same smile from the beach house, the same one that had undone her the very first week. "Always," he said. He asked her on a Tuesday. Not with flowers, not with a speech. They were walking back from the Italian place on the corner, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the waiter who called everyone "my friend," and Owen stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Evelyn took 2 more steps before she realized he was not beside her. She turned. He was standing under a street lamp, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at her the way he had looked at her that first night on the sofa at the beach house. Like he had found something he did not know he was missing. "Be my girlfriend," he said. Not a question. An Owen Bennett statement, delivered the same way he delivered every decision, as fact. "You could at least ask," she said. "Would the answer change?" She walked back to him, stood on her toes, kissed him once, soft and sure. "No," she said. "It wouldn't." He grinned, pulled her against him. They stood under the street lamp for a long time, his chin on the top of her head, her hands flat against his chest, and the city moving around them like water around a stone. 3 weeks later, they organized the lunch. Owen's Aunt Margaret arrived first. She walked into the restaurant in a green cardigan and low heels, silver hair pinned back, and hugged Evelyn before a single word was exchanged. Her hands were warm and strong, and she smelled like cinnamon and the kind of laundry detergent that has not changed its scent in 40 years. "So you're the one," Margaret said, holding Evelyn at arm's length. "I suppose I am." "He's been talking about you like a man who walked into a wall and enjoyed it." Owen closed his eyes. "Margaret." "Hush. I raised you. I earned this." Evelyn's parents arrived next. Her father, tall, quiet, the kind of man who observed before he spoke, shook Owen's hand with a grip that tested and approved in the same motion. Her mother, smaller and sharper, looked Owen up and down and asked if he was the one who had taught her daughter to swim. "Guilty," Owen said. "About time someone did. I tried for 20 years. The table filled, plates arrived, conversations crossed and tangled, and within an hour it sounded like a family that had been gathering for years. Margaret told a story about Owen at 12. trying to cook Thanksgiving dinner alone, and setting off every smoke alarm in the apartment. Evelyn's mother responded with one about Evelyn organizing her kindergarten classroom by color when the teacher stepped out. Owen looked at Evelyn across the table. She was laughing at something Margaret had said, her head tilted, her hand resting on her father's arm. The light caught her face the way it had on the porch that first week. Clean, warm, honest. He knew then. 2 months later, on a Sunday morning in their kitchen, because they had a kitchen now, a shared one, in an apartment 12 blocks from where they had both started, he set a small box on the counter between the coffee pot and a half-eaten bar of dark chocolate. She stared at it, then at him, then at the box again. "Owen, open it." Her hands trembled. She opened the lid. A ring sat inside, simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the morning light and scattered it across the counter. "Marry me," he said. Still not a question. She laughed, the kind of laugh that comes out wet and shaking and sounds like yes before the word arrives. "You are the most impossible man." "That's not an answer." "Yes." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Yes, you impossible, bossy, chocolate-obsessed man." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Later that evening, she stood in the kitchen and noticed the chocolate bar, half-eaten, wrapper folded open, sitting on the counter exactly the way it had on the first day she had walked into the beach house and found a stranger on the sofa. She touched the wrapper with one finger. Some things do not change, and some things, you are in the ones that matter, change everything. 2 lines on a plastic stick. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bathtub, their bathtub in their apartment, the one Owen had insisted on when they chose the place because he said a home without a proper bathtub was not a home, and held the test with both hands. She counted to 10, looked again. Still 2 lines. She found him in the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, eating a chocolate bar, scrolling through his phone with the lazy focus of a man whose Sunday had no plans. He looked up when she walked in. She held up the test. He looked at it, then at her, then at the test again. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, understanding, and something so big it did not fit inside a single word. He set the chocolate down, crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, picked her up. Not a hug. He lifted her off the ground entirely, hands at her waist, arms straight, holding her above him like she weighed nothing. She grabbed his shoulders and laughed, a high, breathless laugh that filled the kitchen and bounced off every surface. "Put me down." "No. Owen, I'm serious. I'm going to be a father." His voice cracked on the last word. Just barely. Just enough. She cupped his face in her hands and looked down at him. His eyes were wet. His smile was the widest she had ever seen, and she had seen a lot of his smiles, the teasing ones, the sarcastic ones, the soft midnight ones he saved for when he thought she was asleep. But this one was new. This one had no armor at all. "You're going to be a father," she whispered. He lowered her slowly, pressed his forehead to hers, stood there, breathing, holding her, saying nothing because nothing was enough. The months passed the way months do when something extraordinary is growing, fast and slow at the same time. Evelyn's body changed, and Owen noticed every shift with the attention of a man cataloguing miracles. He brought her tea when the mornings were hard. He rubbed her feet without being asked. He talked to her belly at night in a low, serious voice, explaining things like quarterly earnings and the correct way to season a steak, while she laughed so hard the baby kicked. On a Sunday in late autumn, the family gathered for lunch. Margaret brought a casserole, Evelyn's mother brought pie, her father brought a bottle of wine he had been saving, and a quiet pride that showed in the way he kept glancing at his daughter, round and glowing, seated beside a man who could not stop touching her hand. They were clearing the plates when Evelyn stopped. She looked down. "Owen!" He turned from the sink, dish towel over his shoulder. "My water just broke." The room erupted. Margaret grabbed her purse. Evelyn's mother grabbed the car keys. Her father grabbed the wrong coat and had to go back. Owen stood in the kitchen holding a dish towel, perfectly still for 3 full seconds, before his body caught up with his brain, and he moved faster than anyone in the room. The hospital was 15 minutes away. It felt like 2 hours. He held her hand through every contraction. He wiped her forehead. He told her she was strong. She was incredible. She was the bravest person he had ever known, and he meant every word with every cell in his body. Then the doctor said, "Push." And the baby crowned. And Owen Bennett, the man who ran a company, negotiated million-dollar contracts, and once carried a woman out of the ocean without breaking stride, looked down, saw the top of his child's head, and dropped straight to the floor. When he opened his eyes, Evelyn was laughing, exhausted, sweaty, radiant, holding a tiny bundled shape against her chest, laughing at him with tears running down her face. He got to his feet, walked to the bed, looked at the baby, small, red, perfect, with fingers that curled around his thumb the moment he offered it. He cried, openly, without shame. The tears fell onto the blanket and onto his shirt, and he did not wipe a single one. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough and broken, "for making me the happiest man alive." She looked at him, at this big, impossible, bossy man who left chocolate on counters and kissed the corner of her mouth and had turned a rental mix-up into the rest of her life. She smiled, the same smile from the beach house, the one he had been chasing since the very first day. "You're still the bossiest man I've ever met," she said, "but now you're my bossy man." He kissed her forehead, then the baby's, then hers again. Outside, the autumn wind pulled leaves from the trees and scattered them across the hospital parking lot. Inside, a family, brand new and already whole, held on to each other and let the world spin without them for a while. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.